was working with pilots when I just began, I understood that I actually need to think like they are in order to cognitively appreciate and design system for them. And this is a luxury to learn to fly. It's expensive, but I thought I can't do it. So in my graduate school, I actually started learning. And part of that, when you get to work with pilots, they're a curious bunch. And one way to kind of learn to fly and actually have the experience, I was in the United Arab Emirates at the start, and there was a Russian Sukhoi airplane, which is an aerobatic plane that would, it will go into positions that you wouldn't want to be flying in if you aren't prepared. And I was. And so they said, if you polish the cockpit with the glass, which gets blasted with sand because of the, where it is, it gets scratched quite quickly. So I would polish it, and the heat is like 40 degrees up to 50. And anyway, so because I polished it, I had a chance to go up. And I wanted to understand how, why would they put an aircraft, in unsupported positions? So, for example, this particular pilot was a South African aerobatic team. And so let's say you're flying with your wings level, and then suddenly, literally, like you can't even think of a split second, but suddenly it would be completely like that, so you would think it would just drop down. But for some reason, on this little blades that are right at the front, it kept propelling forward, and that will go completely inverted and then twist again. And I think it's, I don't know, I've asked, what drives you? And there wasn't an answer of why would he do that? Why would he do that? And that particular pilot, he was also a deep sea diver. So he would go, commercial deep sea diver. So they will go for weeks at a time without coming up into a canister, several, I think it's 100 meters of down. So, and they would breathe a specific gas that will make your voice sound funny. So they would not even talk to each other much because it will make them sound, and you can't really talk on topics, and you also rotate. So people who are inside sleeping and those who are outside are working, and it's kind of an interesting lifestyle. And then he would come back up, right, to the surface, and he will go up doing aerobatic flights. And that's the life of a person. And I thought that's such an interesting way of spend your time on Earth, exploring these dimensions of, I don't know, being in unusual situations where you can't really survive without the equipment. But so I was just interested on how they think. And so I pursued flying to understand that.
Did you complete a pilot's license?
Yes, I've completed a private pilot license and gained a night flying license, because that's also a different type of perception, and it feels like you've got the sky above and below. If you've got a city lights, well, not city, but like not more dispersed lighting, you can't quite, well, you can tell obviously where the ground and the sky is, but it feels like there is this space between. And only when I was able to fly, the pilots actually began opening up and talking. Otherwise, my work, detangling what they're thinking and I would ask them, for example, how is your landing? How was your landing? What were the difficulties? What were you thinking? Where are you looking? And none of those questions, I couldn't get any answers. And so the question I would have, like, how did your landing go? And they say, fine. And my task was to compare a cockpit with an analog display, which was a C-130 Hercules, which is like a massive cargo airplane, and it will have clock dials. So this is like year 2000. And Australian Air Force was swapping for a completely new glass cockpit where all of the screens and computers are. And they were looking for see, what would be difference in performance, because the Lockheed Martin was stating that they could have fewer people in the cockpit, which is, of course, reduces force, people in the cockpit, but they were convinced that they don't need those extra minds, or human wit in the cockpit as they do the operation. And so I was the youngest on the team because I was a student, but we were collecting data, and I just couldn't get much out of the pilots. They would say, how was the landing? And I would say it was fine. It's like, well, how fine? I didn't have the vocabulary, but as soon as I started flying, I was able to say, well, how did that feel? How did you position? Where did you look? And it suddenly started making sense because I could see what they were processing. And that was my joy, I guess, to dive into these peculiarities on what sparks your intuition into the next action.